Have you ever looked back on a previous time in your life and felt like those memories were made by an entirely different person? Well, I can guarantee you that one fictional person who has done this many times is Daria Morgendorffer. In my recent video about the tenuous continuity between Beavis and Butt-Head and its spin-off Daria, we briefly talked about Daria herself and the differences in her characterization between the two shows, but we really only scratched the surface, and that video really got me wondering just how much of the Daria we know and love today can be found in those old Beavis and Butt-Head episodes. So let's find out. Join me as we see what, if any, through lines can be drawn between the two shows regarding Daria's characterization by taking a very close look at the two Darias.
You're in a brand new school in a brand new town.
Like I mentioned in the previous video, Daria's title sequence alone is a pretty good jumping off point for talking about how the character changed after she spun off. The intro itself is kind of perfect. It tells you everything you need to know about Daria in about 30 seconds, highlighting her sardonic demeanor and social detachment. While everyone else either laughs at a movie, cheers at a football game, or cries at a wedding, Daria sits there stone-faced, completely unmoved by any of it. The only thing that seems to bring her any sort of satisfaction is the idea that she's above it all.
I don't have low self-esteem. I have low esteem for everyone else.
In Beavis and Butt-Head, Daria's overall demeanor is largely the same, but she tends to emote a bit more, and is even willing to go along with the crowd every now and then. In fact, there are at least 2 instances where, contrary to her spin-off's intro, she can be seen laughing along with her peers. It happens in Season 2's No Laughing, and again in Season 3's The Trial. And yeah, Daria full-on belly laughing like that is something we never see in her show. On the subject of Daria's detached attitude, a big part of her journey in the spin-off is confronting the reasons why she feels the need to put up those walls. We see how her intellectual nature made her an outcast from an early age. This not only made her averse to socializing, but also instilled in her a palpable fear of vulnerability and emotional attachment. Save for a very select few, she doesn't like to let anyone in, because then they can't hurt her.
And I'm so defended that I actively work to make people dislike me so I won't feel bad when they do. Can I go now?
This all becomes especially apparent in the latter half of the show, which places a much greater emphasis on Daria's love life than the first. And in the end, she realizes that in order to form meaningful relationships and live a fulfilling life in general, she has to be willing to let those walls down. Even if it doesn't always work out, she's still richer for having tried.
You gotta give people a chance. Otherwise, there's no point to the whole being human routine.
This isn't really a thing in Beavis and Butt-Head, and I'm obviously not faulting the show for that. Its structure and focus are very different from Daria's. Plus, not only are its Daria-heavy stories few and far between, but the average Beavis and Butt-Head segment is a lot shorter than any given Daria episode. There's not much room for building out secondary characters in a show like Beavis.
Yeah, go away. Diarrhea.
We can infer that Daria is still a bit of a loner in Beavis and Butt-Head. After all, she was depicted as a bookish, straight-A student from day one, and as I mentioned in my video about her younger sister Quinn, that was seen as very uncool around the time of these shows first airing.
That like brain is your sister?
Are you a brain too?
However, Daria's aforementioned love life is where we start to get into straight-up retcon territory. To start off, we get an interesting little detail about her perspective in the Beavis and Butt-Head Season 6 Christmas special, It's a Miserable Life, a parody of It's a Wonderful Life, if you couldn't tell, in which Butt-Head sees how much better the world would be if he had never been born. This episode suggests that the reason Daria is so against dating is because Butt-Head, being a gross, sexist imbecile, turned her off from boys altogether. And in a world where he didn't exist, she'd be in a happy relationship with one of her classmates, and just a lot more joyful overall. Okay, first of all, Daria voluntarily going caroling? Get out of here. But secondly, Daria's hangups regarding romance in her own show really have nothing to do with Butt-Head and everything to do with that self-imposed emotional isolation that I mentioned before.
You may spare yourself some pain by cutting everyone off, but you miss out on a lot of good stuff too.
Granted, these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive, but if Butt-Head's negative influence really was still looming over Daria by the time she moved to Lawndale, you'd think that that was something that would come up once she started navigating romance in earnest, and it just never does, obviously. If you saw my last video, you'll know that Daria apparently just memory-holed Beavis and Butt-Head after she spun off. And no, her name-dropping them while narrating a series premiere promo doesn't count as canon. Besides, even if Butt-Head actually did make Daria repulsed by guys, she got over it real quick the second she laid eyes on Trent.
Hey, Daria.
What?
It really seems to be less of a boy thing and more of a people thing with her. Yeah, some of the other guys around Lawndale certainly aren't helping,
Feisty.
but she also hits it off with a few, albeit briefly, like Lerman in season 2's I Don't, and Ted a few episodes later in The New Kid. Then of course there's the Tom of it all later on. Daria is unquestionably a feminist, she's very big picture with her beliefs, and her spin-off makes it a point to contrast her with her science teacher, Miss Barch, whose version of feminism is informed by personal grudge. She constantly takes her messy divorce out on her male students, which Daria even indirectly criticizes her for while giving a science report.
She learns to hate and fear all men, regardless of age, race, or taste in jewelry.
In any case, I think the direction the spin-off ended up going with this was a great call on the writer's part, since it gave Daria more agency as a character. I already did a whole trilogy of videos about the show's major romance storylines, and my ultimate conclusion was that the reason they work is because they're really about Daria coming to terms with herself more than anything.
Why don't you say what you're really afraid of? The idea that you might actually start caring about someone, because that would make you vulnerable.
We see her learn to be less obtuse about how she feels and realize that cutting herself off emotionally from everyone around her is going to cause a lot more problems than it solves in the long run. Frankly, that's way more interesting than her being hung up on some weirdo she sat next to in 9th grade.
What's going on, Daria?
This won't be on the test.
What test?
This doesn't even just apply to romance. There's a really nice plot point in the Daria movie, Is It Fall Yet?, where Daria tries reaching out to a young boy named Link because she sees him going down the same path as she did, and she wants to steer him away from it because she knows how lonely it can be.
Look, for what it's worth, when I was your age, I had this friend who was kind of like you.
That's not to say that Daria and Beavis and Butt-Head didn't have an interesting dynamic themselves. For starters, even though Beavis and Butt-Head often make fun of Daria and get on her nerves the same way they would anyone else, they also kind of seem to have a begrudging respect for her, at least as much as they're capable of respecting anybody.
Daria's cool.
On the flip side, while Daria is obviously annoyed by Beavis and Butt-Head's constant nonsense, you never really get the sense that she flat out hates them. In Beavis and Butt-Head creator Mike Judge's own words, she doesn't like them, but she tolerates them, although she kind of seems to pity them above all.
You guys will never graduate.
Never masturbate?
There are even a couple of instances where she goes out of her way to bail them out or check up on them when she really doesn't have to. She's still sarcastic about it, of course, but who knows, maybe these are some early cracks in her armor showing.
I hope you two paid attention because this will come up again.
But so far, I've mainly made broad observations informed by various points in both shows, so what I want to do now is go through some of Daria's more significant Beavis and Butt-Head appearances, roughly in chronological order, and then compare and contrast them with how her spin-off series tackled similar subject matter.
You don't want it to be Highland all over again.
Daria's very first appearance came in Beavis and Butt-Head's 1993 Season 2 premiere, Scientific Stuff. The episode quickly establishes her as Highland's resident straight-A student and pairs her up with Beavis and Butt-Head on a science project.
But Mrs. Dickey, Beavis and Butt-Head are complete imbeciles.
Interestingly enough, while she's not thrilled by this development, she does at least try to meet them halfway and even leaves it to them to come up with ideas. And this makes sense. It's obvious from the beginning that Daria is going to be carrying the project, so she might as well make them work for their grade a little bit. But of course, giving Beavis and Butt-Head any amount of responsibility goes about as well as you'd expect. In the end, Daria makes their stupidity work in her favor by turning the boys themselves into the experiment.
And so we raise an age-old question. Idiocy, genetic or environmental?
Fast forward a few years, and Daria found herself in a similar situation during the first season of her spin-off show in the episode The Lab Brat. Here, she has to work on a science project with Kevin, Lawndale High's star quarterback, who is, let's just say, of comparable intelligence to Beavis and Butt-Head.
Name the colors on the American flag.
Oh, red, white, and blue.
Hey, no fair.
Side note, wild to think that Kevin was originally pitched as a potential love interest for Daria. Feel like that goes beyond opposites attract. Anyway, Daria has a completely different game plan this time around. Rather than trying to make Kevin pull his weight, she opts to keep him distracted watching football the entire time while she works on the project alone. Maybe she learned her lesson from tolerating Beavis and Butt-Head for so long because she sees him as nothing more than a liability, which, yeah, fair enough.
Oops. Sorry.
Naturally, the laws of TV dictate that everything falls apart anyways. But in a bit of a parallel to Scientific Stuff, Daria is able to cleverly spin a would-be disaster into a win for her as far as her grade is concerned.
Excellent job, Daria. You get an A.
All right.
Not you, you man. You get a D.
All right.
Next up, let's look at the Beavis and Butt-Head Season 3 episode Incognito, which is a strong contender for the most Daria acts in the whole show. Remember how I was talking about her spin-off's intro and how it highlights her tendency to act completely unbothered by whatever's happening around her? Well, if this episode is anything to go on, Daria must really have ice in her blood, since she manages to remain nonchalant even as one of her classmates gets into a shootout with some guy who is taking pot shots at the school.
Earl, you don't like Mondays, huh?
I don't like any day.
The weird thing is, while spin-off Daria is known for going against the grain and subverting social expectations, she doesn't feel particularly unique for her demeanor here. This scene appears to be making a larger point about the normalization of gun violence, so everyone kind of shares her blasé attitude about the whole thing. Even Mr. Van Driesen is only, mildly annoyed that he nearly got shot while trying to teach photosynthesis.
Earl? That shot didn't come from your gun by any chance, did it?
But Daria's very next appearance is really interesting. The Beavis and Butt-Head Season 3 episode Sporting Goods gives us what is really the only reference to Daria's home life in the entire show. While we wouldn't actually get to meet her family until the spin-off, she complains about how her parents made her join the Highland High School newspaper staff, and to add insult to injury, the fact that she's a girl gets her pigeonholed as the paper's fashion reporter, which she obviously wouldn't be happy about.
I hate fashion. There's no fashion in this town.
This feels like an episode premise plucked straight out of Daria itself. It was a common occurrence on that show for Daria's parents, especially her mother Helen, to persuade, bribe, and sometimes outright force her to take part in extracurricular activities in an effort to get her to come out of her shell. In fact, that's the whole reason she even met Link. And while Daria never specifically joined the school paper at Lawndale High, she did reluctantly join the yearbook staff in her previously mentioned Season 2 episode, The New Kid, after cutting a deal, of course.
I can't believe you're trying to bribe me with singles.
Daria's comment about hating fashion was also super prophetic. For much of her spin-off series, she had a mutually antagonistic relationship with Quinn, a character who lives and breathes fashion. She didn't become the vice president of Lawndale High's fashion club for nothing, after all.
You probably want to stay away from the house this afternoon. The fashion club is entering the final phase of our blush evaluation and things could get heated.
What makes this all so noteworthy is the fact that Sporting Goods was written by none other than Glenn Eichler, the eventual co-creator and head writer of Daria's spin-off. It's also one of the only 2 Beavis and Butt-Head episodes credited to Eichler that actually features Daria, the other being Season 2's Sign Here.
50,000 volts up the butt.
In a 2017 interview with Vice, Daria's supervising producer John Garrett Andrews noted that part of the reason Eichler was offered the job running the show was because he already kind of had a vision for what Daria would be like as a main character. As a point of reference, the spin-off entered development in earnest around 1995 and premiered on MTV in 97, but Sporting Goods first aired all the way back in 93, so it seems like Eichler had some ideas kicking around for a while before things actually got going. To show a bit of contrast, Daria's parents aren't mentioned at all when she's out collecting pledges in the Beavis and Butt-Head Season 5 episode Walkathon, even though that really feels like something else she wouldn't bother doing unless someone was twisting her arm. But I don't know, maybe it was mandatory. And at any rate, her getting the pledges she needs by blatantly ripping off Beavis and Butt-Head without them realizing it, that's pretty spot on.
Your friend Daria already gave me the 50 cents she pledged you, so if you ante up the $100 apiece you pledged her, we'll be all squared up.
But let's stick with Season 3 for now, because I want to talk about Citizen Butthead, which, not counting her laughing fits, may be the least Daria acts in the whole show. In this episode, President Bill Clinton pays a visit to Highland High, and during the Q&A session, Daria takes the opportunity to hold his feet to the fire.
You promised to help every young person get a college education. Did you mean that? Or were you just jerking us around?
On the surface, this seems very in character for Daria. Throughout her spin-off, she appears to be pretty dialed into what's going on outside her window, and in keeping with her Gen X ethos, tends to hold a rather cynical view of politicians and powerful people in general.
I'm thinking of going into politics.
In her spin-off's Season 2 finale, Right Where It Hurts, she even imagines that one day she'll be able to make a living speaking truth to power.
Every week you write that column of yours trying to wake people up to the truth. My daughter, the Crusader.
For the time being, though, it's a different story, because although spin-off Daria certainly has her morals and her principles, she's not always willing to do something meaningful with them. And that's yet another pitfall of her detached attitude. She's acutely aware of everything wrong with the world, but feels powerless to change it, so she doesn't see the point in kicking up a public fuss, beyond the occasional sarcastic remark.
I protested that book burning last year.
You yelled at the TV screen.
Even in her perfect vision of the future, she struggles to believe that her words will have much of an impact.
I enjoyed your column this week.
More preaching to the converted. I get outraged, the readers get outraged, and nothing happens.
There's a really great instance of Daria having to confront this character flaw in her season 5 premiere, Phys Ed. When Lawndale High sells an absurd amount of ad and vending machine space to a soda company, Daria rightfully views the whole thing as being sleazy and predatory, yet she repeatedly has to be pushed to actually do something about it rather than just sit around complaining.
I don't complain.
That's all you ever do.
I mean, I don't get involved.
Then I guess you don't really care that much, do you?
So, while she eventually learns her lesson, it's hard to imagine Daria telling the president off to his face several years before this. If anything, Clinton's speech is the sort of thing you'd expect her to pointedly sit out. It feels like yet another example of something spin-off Daria would only attend if she was forced to. That's also why it feels really out of character for Daria to take such a panicked, apologetic tone when Beavis and Butt-Head threatened to turn the entire thing into a joke.
Oh, forgive them, Mr. President. Beavis and Butt-Head are emotionally, special.
In her own show, whenever Daria is forced to participate in something she doesn't want to be a part of, she's more than happy to completely undermine the spirit of the event, like in season 2's Fair Enough.
Why aren't you wearing costumes?
We were, but we donated them to the Museum of Glorifying Violence in Medieval Time.
She's not really doing that in Citizen Butthead. Sure, she grills Clinton a little, but that's to be expected when they open up the floor at that sort of political gathering. It's not like she's going rogue or anything, she's still engaging on the president's terms. On top of all that, spin-off Daria has no qualms about sitting back and letting the fire burn anytime something she doesn't care to be involved in goes up in flames. She'll sometimes even facilitate that herself, like in season 1's Cafe Disaffecto, an episode I'll talk more about in a minute. Other times, she'll just bail on the whole thing anyway, like in the Daria Hunter.
Maybe we should turn back.
Maybe your mother will lend you a raincoat.
Shut up and keep walking.
I guess you could argue that the literal president coming to town would make her more inclined to show up, but even 5 years before the Monica Lewinsky story broke, it's hard to imagine that the Daria we know would see much personal value in meeting Clinton. I mean, he was already no stranger to scandal by that point. Also, man, let's just appreciate the concept of Daria finding out that Clinton made Beavis and Butt-Head honorary ATF agents.
Alcohol and tobacco?
Yeah, and firearms.
Cool, huh?
She'd probably see them as 3 peas in a pod if we're being honest. So Daria being more rattled by Beavis and Butt-Head saying dumb shit to the president than she was by actual gunfire just a few episodes prior feels a little off.
Well, I guess he won't be disrupting this class anymore.
Not running away from warning shots, he won't.
Speaking of contradictions, let's jump ahead to season 5's Spare Me, which is one of those instances I mentioned of Daria actually helping out Beavis and Butt-Head. Pretty simple premise here. A couple of girls in a car get a flat tire, Beavis and Butt-Head try to change it because they think it'll get them some action, and it quickly becomes apparent that they have no idea what they're doing. Enter Daria, who swoops in to save the day in rather short order, reinforcing her status as the competent foil to the local idiots.
You guys are so stupid.
This one is complicated though. On one hand, fixing cars and actually driving them are 2 totally different skills, but they're not exactly unrelated. And it feels just a smidge inconsistent that Beavis and Butt-Head Daria can change a flat without even breaking a sweat, while spin-off Daria is shown to be woefully unconfident behind the wheel. We primarily see this in the season 3 episodes Through a Lens Darkly and Speed Trapped.
Show me you can parallel park and we'll never speak of it again.
With that in mind, I think I'm starting to see why Daria's characterization can sometimes feel contradictory, not only between the 2 shows, but sometimes just within Beavis and Butt-Head itself. Daria is a fairly unique Beavis and Butt-Head character in that she's really the only one the show actually takes seriously, at least as far as the original run is concerned.
Get out of here, Beavis.
We're very fortunate, although, in other parts of
Beavis and Butt-Head's 2 main characters are more often than not also its biggest punchlines, but other characters are just as sleazy and self-destructive as they are. I mean, their biggest role model is a 2-bit gang leader and their principal is an unstable alcoholic. Meanwhile, even the characters who are shown to be generally upstanding or kind-hearted are also usually portrayed as being super lame, naive, or otherwise ineffectual. No one in this show really looks good, which comes down to its deeply cynical nature. Daria is a rare exception to this rule. Even when Beavis and Butt-Head mock her, it rings pretty hollow, given that they're throwing stones from the biggest glass house imaginable.
Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha, diarrhea.
Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha. Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha.
Get a life.
Like, my guy, your first name is literally Butt. But if I had to guess, I'd say that Daria sort of became the character the writers deployed anytime they needed someone who A, actually knew what the hell they were doing, and B, commanded at least some genuine respect. The details didn't really matter as much in the character's early days, and the spin-off opened the door to giving her a more well-defined MO. That being said, Beavis and Butt-Head did actually get certain things spot on regarding Daria's long-term characterization.
Not much chance of that happening.
Though there are obviously some major inconsistencies between the two Darias, so to speak, we also know there are plenty of things that ring true across both series. I already brought up Beavis and Butt-Head's Season 3 episode Sporting Goods, but we can see another example in Season 5's Career Day, which first aired in late 1994, several months before the aforementioned Spare Me.
Say, boys, interested in the printed page?
You got anything with naked chicks?
When the students of Highland High are given the opportunity to shadow a professional in the career field of their choice, Daria can be seen chatting with someone from the publishing industry. It's pretty understated, but very in character nonetheless, seeing as how Daria's affinity for reading and writing is one of her most consistent traits across her spin-off.
You're willing to have it published and read by strangers, but you don't want your best friend to see it?
Thank you for understanding.
I already talked about the Daria Season 2 finale, which largely revolves around her suffering from the dreaded writer's block. Hey Daria, same. There's also the aforementioned Season 1 episode, Cafe Disaffecto, which establishes that Daria writes her own series of satirical spy stories starring an original character named Melody Powers. The show would later follow up on this in Season 3's The Old and the Beautiful.
Melody Powers sighed as she began picking what was left of Misha out of her hair.
Season 3 is also home to The Lost Girls, in which an essay Daria wrote is submitted to a teen magazine against her will, and she wins a day with its insufferably self-centered editor. Later in Season 5's The Story of D, Daria submits a short story she wrote to a magazine she actually wants to be published in, and while they ultimately turn her down, they also encourage her to keep trying, even if she doesn't take that to heart at first.
That's what it said? To submit again?
Yeah. Don't they always say that?
No, Daria, that's great.
On that note, if you've ever wondered what Daria actually ended up doing with her life, her spin-off's co-creator Susie Lewis and its supervising director Karen Disher have an idea. To celebrate the show's 20th anniversary in 2017, Disher drew some aged-up Daria character designs for Entertainment Weekly, and the two explained that, in their minds, Daria herself went on to become a late-night talk show writer. Now, I generally don't like to cite extra-canonical material in these videos unless there's a good reason to, which is why you rarely hear me bring up things like Daria's tie-in books, for example. But like I brought up in the previous video, spin-off Daria was sort of a fictionalized version of Lewis's co-creator Glenn Eichler in a lot of different ways. So this career path would actually make a ton of sense for her. After Daria ended, Eichler spent years writing for Stephen Colbert, securing 17 Emmy nominations and 4 wins in the process. I'd like to think that in Daria's universe, those awards are on her shelf.
Sometimes I think I should have gone into television.
You in television, Daria.
I know. Who am I kidding?
But let's pivot back to her humble beginnings in Highland and look at the Beavis and Butt-Head Season 6 episode, U.S. History. This one opens with Daria channeling her inner Dale Gribble by using her oral history report as a means to promote conspiracy theories about the JFK assassination. In no uncertain terms, mind you.
Clearly the assassination was a conspiracy.
This is another weird one when looking at it through the lens of spin-off Daria, because while she's definitely skeptical of authority, she also prides herself on being rational and isn't particularly inclined towards outright conspiratorial thinking. The closest she comes in her own show is probably Season 3's The Lawndale Files, where she can't help but start to buy into UFO hysteria after a series of strange coincidences, and even then, she never fully goes off the deep end, always keeping one foot firmly planted in reality as the rest of the town descends further into what eventually becomes a Red Scare-like panic.
I'm not talking about aliens, but there's something out there. Something stupid.
Speaking of which, what if we decide not to take Daria's JFK report at face value? If there's one thing we do know about spin-off Daria, it's that she loves to be a provocateur from time to time, acting performatively unhinged for her own amusement. In the Season 5 finale Boxing Daria, she straight up admits that she used to write violent revenge fantasies about her classmates for the sole purpose of getting a reaction from school officials. There's also Season 4's Psychotherapy, in which she's forced to take a psych eval and takes it anything but seriously. seriously.
Favorite pastime, changing water into wine?
I knew I should have gone with the burning bush.
This ties into what I was saying earlier, about how Daria is often all too happy to deliberately derail a function she was forced to participate in. That brings us back to Cafe Disaffecto. In the episode, Daria's parents make her take part in a school fundraiser to reopen a local coffee house, and when she raises exactly $0 after rightfully refusing to sell chocolate to a woman whose doctor forbade her from eating it, she has to perform on opening night to get credit instead.
I could have loved you if you weren't as red as the blood stain now spreading across the sand.
Daria chooses to read the first entry in her Melody Powers saga, an over-the-top, excessively violent pastiche of anti-communist Cold War propaganda, and she recites these words not because she actually buys into that sort of McCarthy-esque rhetoric, but because she knows full well that her writing's satirical nature will go right over her peers' heads and whip them up into a frenzy. Lo and behold, they start an anti-communist rally and get the coffee house immediately shut down again. It was all basically an elaborate revenge scheme Daria hatched up for being forced to participate in the first place.
We've got to maintain constant vigilance against those who would manipulate us into actions we'd never take on our own.
I'll say.
All of this is to say that whether or not Daria's JFK report is in character really just depends on if you think she's being sincere or ironic with it. And if it's the latter, she was probably disappointed by Mr. Van Driesen's rather mild reaction.
Thank you, Daria. That gave me the chills.
But it's time to talk about one last Beavis and Butt-Head episode, the final episode of the original run, Season 7's Beavis and Butt-Head Are Dead, in which Daria is really only present to be clip show fodder. But it may also be the one true example of a single Beavis and Butt-Head episode serving as a companion piece to a single Daria episode, at least when looking at the trajectory of her character journey. In Beavis and Butt-Head Are Dead, everyone at Highland High believes that, well, Beavis and Butt-Head are dead, mainly because Beavis said they were for some reason. Mr. Van Driesen is horribly upset by this news, whereas Daria's reaction is far more neutral.
Well, I guess it's kind of sad that they're dead and all, but it's not like they had bright futures ahead of them.
This brief moment is actually a perfect microcosm of how early era Daria tends to interact with the world. She's a staunch realist who conveys her thoughts in a dry, deadpan manner, placing logic above emotion. She does have a dark sense of humor, but unless someone or something is actively pissing her off, she's usually not going to go out of her way to be needlessly cruel. However, she's also not going to sugarcoat things when giving her honest take on something, especially if it doesn't directly affect her.
The whole thing's enough to turn your stomach, which I guess is good if you want to be a model. Eases a transition to bulimia.
This is also what I mean when I say that Daria seems to pity Beavis and Butt-Head more than anything. She's obviously not happy about their supposed death, but she makes no bones about the fact that they weren't likely to amount to much anyway. And I mean, if you've seen the old Beavis and Butt-Head segments from the latest revival, you'll know that she was not exactly wrong.
I guess we need to, get jobs or something. Being unemployed is our job, dumbass.
Daria takes this exact same tone in her spin-off's excellent Season 1 finale, The Misery Chick, only this time she has to grapple with the fact that even if she's not trying to be callous, some people are still going to interpret it that way, up to and including her best friend.
Boy, Daria, nothing gets through to you, does it?
The episode's plot centers around Tommy Sherman, a former Lawndale High football star being honored by the school, and this guy is just the epitome of a sleazebag who peaked in high school. In his one and only scene, he shows up, immediately tries to hook up with an underage girl, then relentlessly insults her boyfriend to his face before getting into it with Daria and Jane as well. After they part ways, the girls make a joke about how maybe Tommy will die soon, and wouldn't you know it, mere seconds later,
Oh my god! The goalpost fell! Tommy Sherman's dead!
As you might have guessed, Daria isn't all that broken up about this. She acknowledges that Tommy's death was a tragedy, but has no problem speaking frankly about the type of person he was, especially when just about everyone else seems dead set on deifying him and whitewashing his legacy.
I mean, the guy Ms. Lee was talking about didn't bear any resemblance to the guy we met.
Daria's attitude rubs Jane the wrong way, and she starts to distance herself from her, though obviously Jane has her own reasons for feeling so put off by all of this.
You want to get some pizza?
I'm going running.
After?
I don't know. It's gonna be a long run.
The two eventually hash things out, and Jane has to be the one to sit Daria down and tell her, look, I agree that this guy sucked, but joking that someone should die only for it to immediately happen doesn't exactly make me feel good about myself. At the same time, Daria is really put off by how people start treating her after Tommy's death. With everyone trying to make sense of what happened, she briefly became the most popular girl in school, as they all went to her for advice on how to deal with sadness. In her mind, everyone's thinking, oh, being depressed is just Daria's baseline, so she must know what I'm supposed to do, and that's a tough position to be in. Like I said, she's not trying to be the misery chick, she just has a very matter-of-fact perspective and doesn't feel the need to perform emotions that she's not actually experiencing.
The guy died.
I know he died. I'm sorry he died. But I'm not gonna pretend he was some great person when he wasn't.
When all is said and done, Daria reaffirms to herself that there's nothing wrong with operating at a different wavelength, but she also realizes that she's been incredibly dismissive of Jane's complex feelings about the situation and learns to be more considerate of others' emotions in general. What's more, regarding her larger character arc of becoming more emotionally vulnerable herself, Daria acknowledges that doing so doesn't have to come at the cost of who she is. On the contrary, it's fully supported by her own realistic worldview, per Alfred Lord Tennyson's In Memoriam.
He's a realist. He says emotional involvement can bring pleasure and extraordinary pain. Then he declares that it's still better than never feeling anything at all.
In other words, Daria may owe Mr. Van Driesen an apology, or at least she would have had Beavis and Butt-Head actually died. And to be fair, her reaction to that whole debacle was far from the coldest.
Beavis and Butt-Head are dead! There will be an emergency faculty meeting in 5 minutes, followed by a brief party.
But here's the kicker. Beavis and Butt-Head Are Dead actually came out after The Misery Chick, since Daria premiered prior to the final season of Beavis. So, if you watched these shows as they were first airing, you saw this character progression in reverse order. Are you starting to see what I mean when I say these two shows have a strange relationship? But now that we've more or less gone through Daria's entire journey, where does that leave us?
Do the names Beavis and Butt-Head ring a bell?
When a new show starts, it's not at all uncommon for its characters to still need a bit of time in the oven. Even after all the behind-the-scenes development leading up to the premiere, there's often still some fine-tuning to be done, especially when you start to get real-time feedback about what is and isn't working for audiences. And it's always interesting to revisit those early episodes and see just how different certain characters are from how we know them today, sometimes dramatically so.
Now look here. You are gonna smoke this entire carton.
Daria is different though. While she went through a lot of growth and development over the course of her solo series, her base characterization was pretty damn consistent from beginning to end. It's really difficult to point at anything from season 1 and go, oh, later season Daria would never do that. And that may have something to do with the fact that Daria got to go through what might have been those early season growing pains on another show entirely.
Wow, even smaller than I thought.
I don't want to reopen the whole alternate reality can of worms like we did in the last video, but Beavis and Butt-Head Daria really feels like a prototype of the character more than they feel like the exact same person. Certain traits were there from the beginning, but she looked different, her demeanor wasn't nearly as consistent, and her behavior was often more plot-driven than anything, which, fair enough, she was a side character. But while she never quite got to that fully crisp image of Daria in Beavis and Butt-Head itself, things did slowly but surely start to come into focus over time, and once her spin-off entered development, the creators were able to take what worked and run with it.
Partying hard or hardly partying?
Hardly interested.
To some extent, Daria was always going to be portrayed differently between the two shows, given just how much Glenn Eichler's sensibilities differed from Mike Judge's, but Eichler did start to plant some of those seeds during his time working under Judge, and the fact remains that without Beavis and Butt-Head, Daria wouldn't exist at all. Her early characterization was a little all over the place, but you have to get through those growing pains one way or another. The things we know and love about Daria didn't just materialize that way out of thin air.
Now the works we'll see here took years of careful crafting.
If you want a perfect representation of the dynamic between the two Darias, look no further than Tracy Grandstaff's iconic voice performance. Her earliest reads on Beavis and Butt-Head sound so different from what we're used to now, but there's still something undeniably familiar at the heart of them, which shines through more and more over time.
I rest my case.
I rest my case.
I rest my case. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another Daria video, this time with a little Beavis and Butt-Head sprinkled in there. This was once again written by Noah Dominguez, who has written all of our great Daria video essays on the channel, among a few other videos as well. Please check out his work and stay tuned for more. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.